Fellow Falcoholics, welcome to another edition of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter, here to bring you part 2 of my series about how the Falcons can get out of this difficult cap situation they find themselves in. Last time, we took a look at some veteran cuts they could make, players that you guys have probably heard of, like Alan Bailey, Ricardo Allen, so on. So if you haven't seen part 1, go check that out for the first part of my quote-unquote off-season plan to help the Falcons find their way out of this situation. Today, we're going to take a look at something a little bit different. Today, we're going to be focusing on restructuring a few contracts. So to explain exactly what that is, when a team restructures an NFL contract, the easiest way, and usually when people refer to restructure, they are speaking about converting that player's base salary for the current year into a signing bonus. And what that will do is will shift the cap hit from that base salary, because base salary, all of the cap hit happens that season. It's always every single dollar put against that season's cap. It will shift it and prorate it over the remainder of the contract. So if you've got a 2-year deal, it'll split it in half and do, some this year and some next year. If you've got a 3-year deal, it'll third it and split it up, over the course of the deal. So generally, restructures are most effective for players who have at least 2 or 3 years left on their deal, because you can spread out money over the remainder of the contract. There are downsides to this as well as upsides. Generally, players will always agree to a restructure because it's signing bonus. That means they get the money immediately, and obviously it's fully guaranteed because it's in their hands. So there's never going to be an issue about a player agreeing to a restructure like this. The issue is that restructuring, while it does free up cap space in the current year, it will add cap hits to the remainder of the deal, and that will also be fully guaranteed money for the aforementioned reason that this is all signing bonus. So depending on the contracts you're talking about, this might not make a big deal. You can work on doing a certain amount of restructuring that makes the cap hit not that bad going forward. If you do max restructures, so you basically take as much of the guaranteed salary as you can, they have to still be paid a minimum amount according to their veteran level, but you can take a lot of that, you could take all of it, you could take some of it. The team is going to have to be the one to figure that out, because the math can get really dicey depending on what you do. For the purposes of this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the maximum possible amounts they can restructure just for numbers' sake. But keep in mind that these numbers are totally just back of the envelope math, supported by, of course, over the caps numbers, and they're pretty good. But depending on what the teams do, these numbers could be totally different. So don't take these numbers as absolute gospel. This is just a high-end scenario of how much money the Falcons could save by restructuring a few key contracts. So we're going to jump right in. I have 3 players in mind that make a lot of sense. The 2 that you guys are probably going to ask about, because they're not going to be in this video, are Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. I have already covered those 2 contracts in detail. So if you want to see potentially what a restructure could do with Matt Ryan's contract and Julio Jones' contract, go check out those 2 videos on the channel. I'll try to put a link in the video description as well so you can find them easily. But the short story is they're probably not going to consider restructuring Matt Ryan because they might be moving on from him in a few years, and obviously adding a bunch of guaranteed money to his deal is not going to make that easier. And Julio Jones, that one's more of a possibility. So look at that video for a little bit more detail on how much they could potentially save. But let's jump right in to taking a look at 3 potential restructures the Falcons could do to help them with this dicey salary cap situation in 2021. So the first player we're going to take a look at is Falcons left tackle Jake Matthews. Matthews has been playing at a high level for the Falcons for several years. Obviously not among the NFL's most elite tackles, but a Pro Bowler, someone who has consistently played at least an above average level, particularly as a pass blocker, and under Kyle Shanahan really was unlocked as a run blocker as well. Jake Matthews is just 20 8 years old. He'll be 29 going into 2021. So this is a player that is likely to finish out his contract, which goes through 2023 with the Falcons. So that makes him an obvious candidate for a restructure, because you're almost certainly not planning to move on from Jake Matthews at any point in the near future. And his contract is rather large and has a lot of base salary. So it's a ripe grounds for getting some cap savings. So currently, according to Over the Cap, the Falcons can save up to $7.95 million in cap space for 2021 if they were to do a max restructure on Jake Matthews. Now, keep in mind the team may or may not decide to do that much. Usually, they don't do the max amount. They might do a lesser amount, or they might do something in between. But $7.95 million is the maximum they could get. If they were to go that route, the downside would be that restructuring that large amount of base salary would add $3.5 million in prorated signing bonus to both 2022 and 2023. So to give you an example of what this would look like, we're going to see how Jake Matthews' cap hits would change over the final 3 years of the deal. So his new cap, his cap hit versus his old cap hit in 2021, his original cap hit was $20.2 million. That will shrink down to $12.26 million in 2022. His original cap hit was $19.7 million. That will increase quite drastically to $23.2 million. And then in 2023, his original cap hit was $18.4 million, and that will go up to $21.9 million. So those are our big cap hits, but looking at the state of NFL left tackle contracts, those aren't that outlandish. So that's why I think Jake Matthews is probably the most likely candidate for a restructure due to his age, due to the fact that his contract was actually getting to be somewhat on the reasonable side for a high-end left tackle. And this restructure isn't going to drastically push his cap hits in those years into some kind of crazy uncharted territory level of numbers. So Jake Matthews is the first one, and probably the most likely because of the amount they could save and because the aforementioned cap hits aren't that unbearable for a left tackle of his caliber. The next player we're going to talk about is linebacker Deion Jones. Jones is coming off a bit of a down year. The whole defense is kind of coming off a down year, if we're being honest, but Jones is still young. He's had some really excellent seasons in his past, and I doubt seriously that the Falcons are planning to move on from him anytime soon. They do have some flexibility with him in 2022 and 2023 if they were to decide to go that route. But since we're talking about a restructure, his contract is one that does have a lot of potential savings in it. According to Over the Cap, like I said, they believe the maximum restructure the Falcons could do for Deion Jones is $4.8 million in cap savings for 2021, which is a lot. That's a whole veteran contract right there for a mid-level guy. The downside of that would be that it would add $2.1 million in prorated signing bonus to 2022 and 2023, and that affects his contract in an interesting way. It would definitely push his numbers in those final years to like premium NFL linebacker contracts. But to give you an example, in 2021, his cap hit would go from $12.6 million down to $7.83 million. In 2022, his cap hit would go from $14.1 million all the way up to $16.2 million. And in 2023, his contract would go from $16.3 million, which is already really expensive, to $18.5 million, which is very, very expensive. So, that's an interesting one, that they can get some savings there. And if the new coaching staff is confident in Deion Jones returning to his high level of play, then you're not maybe so upset about paying him premium linebacker money in those final 2 years. What they have to weigh is, Deion Jones is also very young. Like, he'll be 27 in 2021. So this is not a player who's likely to fall off over the course of this contract. But doing this restructure does limit the savings they could get from moving on from Jones in 2022 in a big way. But it doesn't really affect 2023 all that much, because very little of Jones's contract at that point is guaranteed. So they could still save about $10 million by cutting Deion Jones in 2023 if they wanted to go that route. So this restructure at this point, isn't going to debilitate their options with Jones over the long haul, but it could free up a significant amount of space this year. So this is another one that I think they're likely to target. I don't know if they'll do the full amount, like I said, but a good option to get some more cap space in here. The final one we're going to take a look at is one that I've mentioned on Twitter and on the live show. That is Grady Jarrett, defensive tackle, arguably the best player on the entire defense. It's probably not close either. Jarrett is awesome. He'll be just 28 going into 2021. The interesting thing, however, about Jarrett is that his contract does expire in 2022. So while they can save a ton of money still by restructuring him, it jacks up his 2022 cap hit a lot because there's only 1 year to spread this money out over. That's why this one is maybe less likely, especially the maximum restructure. I think that they probably will move to restructure him some amount because they're going to need the money, but will they do the full amount? I doubt it. An extension could also be on the table for Jarrett. We're going to talk about extensions in another future episode of this series, but at this point, Over the Cap believes that the Falcons could save up to $6.25 million in cap space for 2021 with a restructure of Grady Jarrett. The other side of that coin is that because there's only 2 years, that means that it will be adding $6.25 million in prorated signing bonus to 2022 to give, so you're basically trading salary this year for salary next year. This is a weird year. The salary cap is likely to be flat for the first time in a long time. The Falcons might gamble that the salary cap could go up next year a lot if the league rebounds in a big way. So we'll see what happens there. But to give you a reference of what exactly adding that much money to his contract would do is it would shoot his contract into like unprecedented defensive tackle numbers in 2022. So it would this restructure would drop his 2021 cap hit from $20.8 million all the way down to $14.58 million, which is a lot of savings, obviously. But in 2022, where his cap hit had already gone up to almost $24 million, he will now be sitting at around $30 million with this restructure, which is unprecedented level defensive tackle numbers. Now, maybe you're comfortable with that for a year because Grady Jarrett's awesome. He's not going to let you down. He's one of the most reliable players on your team, and you're probably going to extend him before you get to 2022 and actually pay out that $30 million anyway. So maybe it's not that big a deal, but that is a lot of a cap hit for a defensive tackle. I mean, that's like Aaron Donald money or even more than that. So that's a significant investment at that point. So, we will see what's going on with that. But at the end of the day, I do think it's pretty likely that they will pull off at least some of these restructures. I don't know that they'll pull off all three, but at least a few of them are on the table because they're going to need the money. And if we, add up some of the money they could save, assuming they were to do these maximum level restructures on these guys. Let me do some quick back of the envelope math here. So if they were to just do max restructures on Jake Matthews, Deion Jones, and Grady Jarrett, they have freed up $19 million, which is pretty crazy in terms of that amount of cap space. They might desperately need it, particularly if the cap does go down in some sort of nightmare scenario. That's a lot of money that they could be using to fill out the roster or otherwise. So definitely these are the moves that I think they will consider, and they'll need to make at least some of them to have a tenable cap situation in 2021. Well, there you have it, Falcons fans. 3 restructures the Falcons could pull off to try to help with their salary cap situation going into 2021. You guys know certainly that this is a dicey situation. They're going to need to find money somewhere. There's only 31 players under contract at this point, and they need to get to 53. So they're going to have a lot of draft picks. They did sign, 11 guys to reserve future contracts. that are those practice squad level players. So they're going to be able to get it done. But that $19 million from these restructures could go a long way in helping them field a more competitive roster. And if you combine that with the numbers from episode 1, which was the veteran cuts, and you do all of those veteran cuts that we mentioned, including Dante Fowler, the total they could save between these max restructures and those veteran cuts is $41.75 million, which if you're keeping score at home, that would be enough to get them under the cap and have some breathing room, even if the cap drops to that nightmare sort of level. Obviously, that would be the worst possible scenario because the Falcons would have cleared out all of these contracts and backloaded, this stuff with restructures, and they'd probably only have, $20 million total to play around with to sign 22 players. That would still not be great. The flip side is that the nightmare scenario is not likely to happen, and it's much more likely that we have a flat cap this year, and the Falcons are looking at having more like 38, 39 million when it's all said and done to sign those 22 players. That could give them the flexibility to re-sign a player like Keanu Neal. That could give them some breathing room to go get a few choice mid-level veterans or a few key re-signings. They'll have a lot more flexibility to do the moves that they need to do to make this team competitive and win now if that's where they go. It's also possible that they elect to kind of minimize these restructures and kind of go into sort of a mini rebuild year here where they fill out the roster with a lot of young guys, a lot of UDFAs, just to see if they can unearth some diamonds in the rough. And they don't really go into 2021 expecting to be super competitive, but they're hoping to get another high draft pick probably, and see if they can reboot this thing in 2022 or 2023 with a top 5 quarterback and a lot of hopefully young talent and more space going forward in years where the cap is more flexible. So there are options on the table for this team, I'm sure. It looks like soon to be ex-Saints assistant GM and vice president Terry Fontenot will be the Falcons general manager. So I'm interested to see what his plan is. I'm sure he has one. We'll be talking about that more in the coming days. As soon as he's officially announced, I'll be doing a video kind of looking at Fontenot's history. But until then, guys, we do appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate that, guys. You can follow the show on Twitter at Falcoholic Live. You can get updates for when we go live and post new content. We are still doing our Wednesday shows every Wednesday at 8:10 p.m. Eastern. We plan to keep doing that at least up until after the draft. We might take a little bit of a break in the dead period because there's just nothing to talk about. But at least up until April, we'll be continuing to do the Wednesday shows. And we really appreciate all you new subscribers, including Jeremy Schmidt, who subscriber bombed my previous recording during the episode. So shout out to you for happening to subscribe while I was recording this. So, thank you for that. We appreciate that. I'm too lazy to edit that out. So, you get a shout out on this video. So thanks, brother. But, again, guys, thank you so much. Be sure to join us on Sunday. We're going to be doing another playoff watch party and hoping that the Bucs are able to take down the Saints and dethrone our hated rivals. It feels weird to be somewhat cheering on Tom Brady, but these are the dire straits that we're in as Falcons fans this offseason. Again, guys, thank you so much for your support. We've really appreciated it over this last season, and for those of you that have been there since the beginning, we appreciate all you guys too. So until next time, guys, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter. Have a great one. Check out our community Discord. Check out our Patreon if you're interested in helping to support the channel financially, and if you're interested in getting some of those exclusive perks like our Q&A session, which is going to be going on shortly for our patrons. So thank you to everyone who has helped out with that so far. We really appreciate you guys. Have a good one, folks, and I'll talk to you next time.